CMFR has three flagship programs: Promotion of Media Ethics and Responsibility, which monitors coverage and identifies weaknesses and failings in the practice; Press Freedom Protection and Media Defense, that documents attacks and threats against the media, as well as campaigns and advocacies upholding their autonomy; and the Recognition of Journalism Excellence and Best Practice, designed to encourage quality in news reporting. All three flagship programs of CMFR are linked by the larger purpose to help develop a free press that would serve as the fourth pillar of democracy in the Philippines.
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased to introduce today's MC and moderator. Ms. Melinda Quintos de Jesus is the founder and executive director of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. She conceptualized the institutional framework and design of CMFR's core programs. She is also the publisher of the annual journalism review, Media Times. Ms. De Jesus has developed training programs on media and the justice system, human rights reporting, peace journalism, coverage of the marginalized sectors, and other emerging issues in the news agenda. Ms. De Jesus served several terms as a member of the International Freedom of Expression Exchange Council and the Steering Committee of the World Movement for Democracy. She is a founding member of the Board of Trustees of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance and the Philippine-based Freedom Fund for Filipino Journalists, Incorporated. She was journalist in residence at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and a fellow of the Joan Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy, based at the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard University. Please welcome Ms. Melinda Quintos de Jesus.
Good morning. Before we begin, may I ask everyone, and those of you who who wish to just keep seated, everyone to stand up in silence as we acknowledge all that we have lost and all that we have learned during the last 3 years of the pandemic crisis. Thank you very much. And good morning again, and welcome to the first face-to-face Jaime V. Ongpin Journalism Seminar since 2019. After 3 years of holding the program on Zoom, it is just too wonderful for words. You don't know how good it is to see you all in this hall as we celebrate the good work that journalists are doing to keep journalists, Filipinos, better informed. Honorable guests, I think it doesn't want to stay in place. Honorable guests, the family and friends of the late Honorable Jaime V. Ongpin, co-workers in the field of media, students and faculty of 10 learning institutions in and around Metro Manila who are present here, friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, thank you all for your presence. And I welcome just as heartily all who are tuned in on our live stream program from all around the country, and we hope Wi-Fi keeps us all connected. Going digital in 2020, we had gained a larger audience in the first year of the pandemic, especially when people were so hungry for engagement. CMFR decided that we would keep this audience out of Metro Manila and keep connected to these communities. So wherever you may be this morning, please feel free to post online about today's event using the hashtag JVOJS2023. Thank you all from all over the Philippines. Thank you for joining us. And now I am happy to introduce the different tertiary institutions registered and present in the hall. And I'd like to ask them to stand up so that everybody can see who is here. We have representatives from the Ateneo School of Government. Assumption College, who were here very early. Students as well can stand with their faculty. The Colegio de San Juan de Letran. Miriam College. St. Scholastica's College. The University of Santo Tomas. The University of the Philippines, Los Baños. The University of the East. And St. Paul University from Quezon City. Let me say now that we depend on the audience in the hall and their active engagement for the success of our program, and encourage you to listen and to prepare to talk back to our panel, follow up with your questions on anything they say during the discussion, to ask about subjects that we may not have had the time to talk about. As in the past, our program this morning will be in two parts. The first will hold the panel discussion and the open forum, and the second part is the announcement ceremonies for the Marshall McLuhan Fellow for 2023 and for CMFR's Award of Distinction and the giving of the certificates to all panelists. A bit of history for the program, especially for those of you who are too young to have any sense of its history. We designed it in early 90s. The first was in 1990 to encourage more in-depth reporting, more analysis and interpretation, more investigation and stories that those in power may prefer to keep secret or classified as confidential matters. Because the country had just then experienced a lengthy period of controlled news and information. It was important to stimulate the kind of journalism after the period that we call martial law, in order for journalists and the press to provide news not just about events, but also about developments and processes, searching for answers beyond the easy questions of who, what, when, where, which are all important to get correct, to the more complex why, and the important wow, how. The program expanded to recognize both investigative reports with original. We started to award investigative reports and then included explanatory reporting in order for people to understand so much of the complexities going on. Eventually, we had to expand the program because as year to year the reports got better, stronger, more daring in exposing wrongdoing in high places, investigating even the judiciary, forcing resignations, including encouraging people to know about the corruption, and forcing President Joseph Estrada to resign. Philippine investigative reporters were world class. They were talked about in conferences and in many meetings around the world. But it also meant that the very best were dominating the awards. And therefore, we had to decide that it was time to acknowledge the different kinds of reporting and the value of all the different kinds of journalism, because that is what news is about. It is made up of different stories about different people, not just about government. And we need more journalists to provide more innovative ways of delivering the news. While CMFR keeps its eyes on the new platforms, we have limited our monitor to newspapers, TV, and online. And it is from these that we have drawn our panel. It is also a way of highlighting the importance of the editorial process. Journalism is an edited process, and good editors and good editorial management play an important role in producing quality journalism, as the opposite is true. If you don't have good editors, you don't have good journalism. There is no one discussion that will define how we should look at all these matters, but for now, let me stress that students must learn early enough the importance of verification, verification, verification. This is done by support with research, with fact checks, and overall gatekeeping that ensures the inclusion of the significant and the relevant, and the greater importance and relevance must be given the necessary prominence. It is important to connect the craft also to the building up of citizenship. People must know what is necessary for them to know, to make sound judgments, and to think further on the issue, especially when they fulfill their duty as voters choosing their leaders. The decline of democracy has been shown most dramatically by the display of turmoil in governments of advanced countries, advanced democracies. In our country, the failure of our institutions is rooted in dynastic politics, in corruption, and the use of state violence against citizens. Elections can provide mechanisms for change and reform only if you have citizens who know what is going on and who know how well or how poorly their leaders are providing for their services. This is the institutional basis that makes elections meaningful. And good journalists providing information and news make it possible for citizens to choose their leaders thoughtfully and wisely. In recent years, we had asked JVO fellows to describe the threats and the dangers they face, to discuss the future of journalism in a landscape tarred by disinformation campaigns mobilized by government itself, by vested interests of media owners, and by the culture of fear shrouding the process of news gathering. How do journalists feel in 2023? How do we choose the journalists as well who will talk to us about the state of the media? The JVO program is rare in that it does not require self-nomination or other forms of recommendations. CMFR undertakes as part of its flagship program to promote media ethics and therefore conducts a journalism review or a media monitor, which allows us in to note the good and the bad that journalists do. More strongly put, the work that deserves to be cheered or jeered. This enables CMFR to identify our panelists based on the direct knowledge of their work. It is at this point in the program that I call on Professor Luis Teodoro to describe the process of selection, and sadly he is no longer with us as he succumbed to a heart attack early this year. We would like to share his work. Mr. Teodoro was twice Dean of the University of the Philippines College of Mass Communication. I know that he is alive and he continues to support the work to which he gave so much of his energy and his intellect. I know that he would be very pleased that I've asked we confirmed, the youngest trustee of CMFR to take his place, in explaining the selection process, as well as to call on the names of the judges who are here. Sorry, Ed Lingao. And those of you who do not know, Ed Lingao is a veteran journalist who has covered war and conflict situations. With over 2 decades in the news media, he has been writer, correspondent, reporter, producer, news manager, working variously in print, broadcast, and the new media. He is currently anchor of Frontline tonight, TV5's late night newscast, as well as other news programs in One News.
Maraming salamat, ma'am. It's a bit strange to hear that I'm the youngest. I have white hair. Did somebody record that? I'm the youngest pala. Okay. Honored guests, panelists, professors, and students of journalism, friends, my task this morning is to describe CMFR's process of selecting the JVO Fellows for each year's program. Now, that was a task that used to be delivered by the late Dean Luis Teodoro, who went ahead in March of this year. And today we also honor his memory. And the task has been handed to me today. Now, Dean Teodoro used to be my teacher in UP. He looked the same before, 36 years ago, as when I last saw him. But to be honest, I was always terribly afraid that he would remember me from my student days. You see, in keeping with the hallowed traditions of UP, I was not always a good student. But one thing I do remember from my teachers as a joint student was that you do not really learn journalism in university. What you do learn is how to learn. You learn that there is so much that you do not know, and that learning continues long after your graduation, even long after retirement. And more importantly, you unlearn what you thought you knew. And this, I'd like to think, is the best way to frame things for those of you who may want to join this profession. This is a profession where you're both student and teacher every single day. In the morning, you are a student. You go out, you do research, you ask questions, you interrogate. That never ends. Journalists who forget that are not real journalists. You learn something new every day. So every morning you are a student, and by the time it's deadline time, you become a teacher. You write. You tell people. You tell stories. You hopefully educate people after you educate yourself. So what other profession can give you that privilege of being student and teacher all in one day? I can't think of one. Now, whether you become a good journalist or a bad one will depend, of course, on what values you take with you into this profession. And so we are here today to recognize those who uphold the best in journalism. The selection process is embedded in CMFR's flagship program to promote ethics and responsibility in the practice of journalism. It is embedded in the first flagship program, which involves a continuing media monitor of reporting in mainstream media, which CMFR has called the Philippine Journalism Review Reports, or PJRR. This consists mainly of review articles of coverage which can involve content analysis when focused on campaign and elections, or any other extensive process through a period of time. For example, Duterte's war on drugs, or disaster and disaster response. The activity shows up the outstanding journalists and their work. So sometimes you will see the repeat offenders, repeat journalists, because they keep on doing good jobs, good work. And this is how we honor them. Oh, before I forget, it's always good to have 2 or more journalists in one room, good journalists, because that either means that there's something good happening or there's something bad happening. I think there's something good happening today. Anyway. Now, it is from this activity that CMFR begins its list of journalists consistently producing quality reports. The staff then presents these names along with articles which have been cheered or noted in other ways by the CMFR. There were in all 16 names in the list submitted to the judges, who received the links to reports in newspapers, TV, and online. The judges this year included CMFR's journalist trustees, Kaloy Conde of Human Rights Watch, and the former Philippine correspondent of the New York Times and the International Herald Tribune. We have Lorna Calao Tirol, former Inquiry Readers Advocate, book author and editor, also formerly from the Manila Chronicle. Tina Monson Palma. Hi, ma'am. I'll see to the small Tina. Veteran journalist Tina Monson Palma, now with ABS-CBN News Channel. Vergel Santos, former publisher and chair of the Board of Editors of Business World, also formerly Manila Chronicle, and of course myself. There's of course Melinda Quintos de Jesus, the director of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, who was a participant moderator. Now, each year the judges are invited to include journalists that they think should be included. The CMFR held a Zoom discussion as one household was quarantined for 14 days for a COVID-19 infection. Vergel, who was unable to attend the actual Zoom discussion, reviewed the list and signed on to the judgment of his colleagues. The judges then discussed the different issues in the context of the news of the period, which articles were focused on the most sensitive or the most significant developments. We were all interested in getting to know young journalists doing good work and wanted a panel with more young and new faces. However, the value of seniority and experience were consistently raised as well. We relied on our own familiarity with and our insights into the work of individual journalists. So the list included 10 names, as the availability or willingness of journalists to be participants had to be considered. We should also point out that not all the journalists in the final list drawn up by the selection committee always agree to be part of the panel. Some have begged off for reasons of schedule problems, and in one instance, over health reasons. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. We now go back to Melinda. Ma'am.
I was not able to say that Ed was named a JBO Fellow several times, maybe 5, returning as a panelist to broaden and deepen the discussion with his experience, and he also did his stint as a Marshall McLuhan Fellow. We like to point out that if we had a larger table, a larger hall, more money, more resources, that we would add more. But even when we did Zoom, we could only fit so many faces on the screen. And so we are limited. We are limited, definitely, by the fact of limited resources and limited time. And so we are now going to begin and do the core heart of the program. And for your guidance, I do think of everyone's comfort and convenience. We call a 5-minute intermission after the open forum before we begin the second part of the program. I shall now call our panelists in the alphabetical order of their last names. Christina Chi. Christina is a multimedia reporter for philstar.com. She covers various beats, including education and human rights, for which she has written stories on climate change education, support for public school teachers, and the disappearance of student activists. She also reports on developments in the office of the Vice President and in the House of Representatives. The youngest among the panel, Christina, finished her journalism degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, in December 2022 and has since worked for philstar.com. I next call Katrina Domingo. Katrina Domingo is a reporter and anchor for ABS-CBN News Channel, or ANC. She produces field reports for Filipino language newscast TV Patrol and hosts ANC shows including Head Start and Top Story. Katrina is also a section editor for ABS-CBN News Digital, the online news arm of the network. Her multimedia stories, The Boracay Project and Taal Through Eruption and Pandemic, garnered honorable mentions in 2019 from the 2021 Society and 2021 from the Society of Publishers of Asia Awards. Katrina was previously with CNN Philippines as news correspondent covering Congress. She is also an Adenauer Fellow for Media and Communications in Asia. Jodez Gavilan. Jodez is a writer and researcher for Rappler and its investigative arm, Newsbreak. She covers human rights and has written extensively on the continuing drug war of former President Rodrigo Duterte, the stories of families left behind in the International Criminal Court's investigation. She also hosts the weekly podcast, Newsbreak, Beyond Stories, which aims to make sense of people, events, and controversies dominating the news cycle. Jodez is a fellow of the Shelter City Initiative of the Foundation of Justice and Peace, Netherlands, a non-profit based in The Hague that promotes human rights and social justice. Bons Magsambol. Bons is a multimedia reporter for Rappler covering the Senate. Prior to this, he wrote stories about health and education, including dubious laptop deals involving the Department of Education. Bons was formerly with the investigative and research group of ABS-CBN News, where he produced election-related datasets for the coverage of the 2016 elections. Earlier this year, He was selected for the New York-based fellowships at Auschwitz for the study of professional ethics. And Mike Navalio. Mike is a multi-platform journalist for ABS-CBN News. Until recently, he served as Justice Beat reporter covering the Department of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the judiciary. He also previously anchored AMC's early morning news program, Rundown. Mike has covered stories on the Ampatuan massacre, the International Criminal Court, the war on drugs of the Duterte administration, the oral arguments on the petitions challenging the Anti-Terrorism Act, and the ABS-CBN shutdown. He was part of the team that received from the Society of Publishers in Asia 2017 Award for Human Rights Reporting for online series War on Drugs and Unheard Voices. Prior to joining ABS-CBN News in 2015, the lawyer was litigator for CICIP Law and was a research consultant for Amnesty International's research on police torture. Mike is the only second lawyer journalist that I, in my long career, had know of. And the other one was a lawyer, was under bar because he didn't bother to do it, and became a journalist, and so you are a rare find. A note to our audience, for the last 2 years, my staff has been nagging me to please make more time for the open forum because the students want to ask questions, they want to talk. To which I have always responded, but it always takes them so long to begin to ask questions. This was beginning to change in 2019, and I am being told that this generation, whatever alphabet you are called now, really more talky, and so I am asking you to please take down notes, make sure you prepare your questions, listen to the questions also so that you do not repeat what's already been asked and already been discussed. Rules clear? I'm a terrible teacher. No, I'm a tough teacher. So, I now just been told that I have to hold the mic, which I have been trying to avoid because I don't think I think sharply with one hand. Here we go. Warming up. Let's try to get to know our journalists, our panelists. They are very much like or went through very much the experience that you, perhaps as younger people, looking to other models, looking to people that they get interested in the work of those who are before them. And so a personal opening question for each one, and I have told them already previously, don't tell us your entire life love story. Why did you become a journalist? Quickly, in a few sentences, and anyone who's ready can just jump in. We do not follow any chronology here. Anyone who would like to start? I don't, yay, very good, wonderful.
Yeah, hello. Okay. Yeah, it's working now. Hello, I'm Zodes. I think I never set out to be a journalist when I was an undergraduate. Much like everyone else, I guess, in this room, I wanted to be a lawyer, but much to the dismay of my parents, I didn't go into law. One of the reasons why, because I realized that journalism is the best way for me to fulfill that desire inside me to learn more. It's the only job that I know that can allow me to learn about not just specific things, but a whole broad of things. And I've been in this field for almost 10 years now, and that's the thing that keeps me motivated to wake up every morning, call my sources, talk to the families of drug war victims, score through thousands of documents, because I know I need to learn more information that could help me better serve the Filipino public. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
As the oldest in the panel, I was thinking about how to be better, how to be able to serve without being in government, and I thought that this particular field, being in journalism, you're able to share what you know, you're able to share what you gather, and you feel connected to what's happening in the country, and that has been my motivation ever since to become a journalist.
I think the moment that I wanted to be a journalist was solidified in the middle of the pandemic. Like many of the students here, I was cooped up at home for 2 years studying through Zoom. But I wanted to be a journalist because whenever I read really well written, sensitive, and careful and critical reports, it always gave me a feeling of being very grateful that there are reporters who are always scrutinizing the issues that could easily pass us by. And I guess it's that sense of gratitude that inspired me to also, maybe one day other people could feel that way towards me.
Very good.
So hi, I'm Bon Magsambol. So actually most of my students are here. And yeah, I was always asked by them, Sir Bon, why are you a journalist? Why did you become a reporter? I would always tell them that it was never a plan. It was never a plan. I just enjoy telling stories. I just enjoy hearing people, their stories. And as long as there are injustices, as long as it's still unfair to live out there, I'll be a journalist.
Being last because my story started very shallow. When I was a kid, I didn't have any talent. I didn't know how to dance. I didn't know how to sing. I sucked at math. I was terrible at it. And the only thing I was good at back then was talking. And back then, the BPO industry wasn't a thing yet. So the only logical thing for me to pursue was a job that involved a lot of talking. And I thought, why not become a TV reporter? And then as I learned the process, I realized that it wasn't much of talking, but more about listening and more about understanding the complex issues and then breaking them down to the public for more people to be able to understand them. And when they understand the issues, then you realize that you don't just get to talk, more people get to talk about these issues, not just mundane issues, but issues that matter. And that's the reason why I'm here now.
Thank you very much for that great opening. During the pandemic, panelists described how difficult it was to find sources and that one had to work harder to get them to talk to a reporter. It could have been the pandemic or the effect of President Duterte. Duterte's hostility was really like a viral contagion. Other public officials didn't want to talk and make themselves available to the press either. Much has been said about how President Marcos has not been hostile to the press. Can you talk now or share with us how much easier it is to report on government matters and getting public officials to talk, confirm, deny? Anyone just jump in?
There's a perception that with the new administration, it's easier now, supposedly because we don't hear attacks against media institutions. At least it's a relief that we don't hear the president attacking Inquirer, Rappler, or ABS-CBN. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's easier for us nowadays. You do have a lot of restrictions still, that they started closing the courts. Through the media, they started saying we have to comply with data privacy rules. So it's not actually getting easier, and we're not also getting answers to some of the questions because some of the government officials would rather not entertain questions from the media. So it's not true. There's a perception that they're friendlier, but that doesn't make our job easier nowadays.
They may be friendly, but they're really not telling you much. It's anyone here want to add
I can
to
talk about like my personal experience because I covered the drug war even after the Duterte administration. Basically, we know that the killings continue, but we wanted to get data from the Philippine National Police. What they do is they tend to drown you into nonsense. In nonsense, they will give you terrible, terrible data. And when you want to confirm this with the Philippine National Police spokesperson, she will never reply. I think more than a year into the administration, I've never gotten any reply from the PNP spokesperson. And my colleagues here can attest to that. So that small things, that it can be in the bigger picture, it can be minuscule, but in the quest for transparency, especially in the aftermath of this gruesome drug war that we want justice, it can be a huge dent in the quest for the justice for the families.
Okay. Are you ready, Bon? Yes.
Hello. Okay. I don't think it's easier now with this new administration. I'll speak from my own experience. So I covered the Philippine Senate for Rappler, and just weeks ago, I asked the sister of the president, who is also a senator, her stand on confidential funds. But she singled me out in that press conference, and she said, "Why are you asking me that? Paulit-ulit na lang tayo sa issue na yan." Sabi ko, it's budget season, Senator, and lies with the Congress, right? So she didn't answer me right away, but after the press conference, she was looking for me. Who is that reporter asking about confidential funds? And I told her, Rappler. Oh, kaya pala, hayaan na lang natin yan. So she was inviting more reporters to just don't mind me if I was asking. I mean, the issue on confidential funds is a hot topic now because it involves public's money, right? So yeah, so I don't think it's easier to get answers from questions now.
Okay, unless you're disagreeing, I think we can confirm it's not easier. We're not getting better information. We're not getting more, and journalists have to work harder and use all kinds of skills, basically, to get public officials to talk to you. Let's talk about how you look at the future of journalism or your work, even now, given the primacy of social media in the news habits of your audience. How conscious, or those of you who worked before when social media was not at its height, how do you respond to this, that they're all now just in social media? And social media, talk to us about this. Katrina, good.
So last year, JVO panelist and eventual Marshall McLuhan awardee Carmina Constantino talked about being more empathetic with our audiences. And one of the responses of ABS-CBN News to that was launching a vertical storytelling platform called Patrol ng Pilipino. Before, TikTok had this image that it was just all about dancing, all about making pa-cute on social media. But later on, we realized that people are sticking more on TikTok, spending more time on TikTok than on television sets, than on our websites. So what we had to do was to get off the high journalistic horse and basically adapt to the demands, to the appetite of the audience. That's why now we are also producing content na vertical storytelling. The storytelling is much more informal, it's much more relatable, and it is delivered in a language wherein the Gen Zs or even the titas of Manila can easily relate to. That's how we make news more palatable to the audiences now who have very shorter attention spans.
Are you worried that perhaps the most significant, the most complex, the real problems are not going to be able to be part of the news agenda? Do you feel that there is an effect here? If you wish to answer this question.
Okay, just a follow-up question related on the vertical storytelling. That is the challenge to us now on how we make not so sexy issues more sexy and more palatable to the audiences. So even if we talk about the Israel-Hamas war, not all Filipinos, especially the jeepney drivers, the aling barangs, the mang Joses out there, would easily appreciate those issues, but it is a challenge to us to make it more relatable to them. So I'm not really worried that the big issues would be placed on the back burner if we continuously make an effort to make those stories easier to understand for our viewers.
Okay, anyone wish to add to that?
Well, I
Mike?
agree with Kat that it's a way to reach out to audiences who otherwise would not watch the news. I also am concerned that logistically in a news organization, if you devote more resources to TikTok, for example, you might leave out resources for investigative journalism, which some outfits are prioritizing. So there's that concern, but I think there should be a balance. Even as you invest in TikTok, you also don't forget your roots, and which is to go into investigative reporting, because that's how you uncover the issues that matter. And then you can translate that into TikTok so that you can reach more people, giving you more access to your audience.
Can you describe then the kind of support that you are getting for keeping the significant, the relevant, the complex as part of the news? Or is this pressure to reach out to this audience that is no longer listening to the news and going the light or the other way in terms of increasing other topics or putting more topics? I bring this up because in the past, in the long past, maybe no one remembers anymore, when newspapers did not have lifestyle, newspapers did not have cooking pages or motoring pages or travel pages. Newspapers were about what was going on that affected the lives of people. And there would be, those of you who watched Lou Grant know the debates then in terms of increasing the drawing power of what, or do you wish to add to this?
Like making the hard, the nitty-gritty stories digestible is Rappler's devoted a team. Cluster where the human rights, it's easy for journalists like me or even my teammates to be drowned in the issues that we cover, we write. And it's hard for us to think of what, in many ways, can we make derivatives out of this. So we have another two sets of people, especially they are from the social media team, the more Gen Z, so they have fresh eyes. They know what the audience wants. They know what works in each platform, so they work on that instead of us just as journalists working with the mindset of this is what we want. But with them, they will work in the mindset this is what the audience wants. So it's kind of a compromise, and so far so good. There's no big misunderstanding, and we work well.
So again, the importance of balance, of dialogue within the newsroom, and dialogue also with the audiences that you want to reach. What other, you can look at me when I'm asking the question, but I want you to look at the audience when you answer, okay? What about the use of technological advances? Yes, let's talk about AI, as there's been much talk about that. While it is still just at the advent in this country, do you sense this as a threat to job security? No more need for journalists? No more needs for reporters? Is this an issue because we can jump over it and not talk about it? Because frankly, I'm waiting for AI to do something in journalism that I would say, oh my God, that's really great. Yeah.
I think AI is an issue in journalism, but if we only allow it to be an issue. I mean, AI is there. It's not going anywhere. But the thing is, journalists can adapt to it. Not really like, in a way, like, for example, transcribing. For example, a story needs to be translated to another language. You can use AI. But yeah, but I don't think AI, we should like really fight AI, but we should learn how to adopt in using AI because it's not going.
AI in order for you to become a better. Would you like to add? Yes, please.
Just jumping off of Bon's point, I think, especially for journalism students, AI cannot just be a threat but an opportunity as well, especially specifically generative AI. Like AI-powered chatbots, it should definitely not write your stories for you or write your scripts for you. Journalism is still all about the method, the human judgment. the experience, the years built covering issues and tying and weaving it together. But I do, like, since I'm a reporter, I cover education. I've spoken to a lot of teachers who are also very them or make them less relevant to their students. But I take inspiration from one of the education experts that I interviewed about it, that it's also an opportunity to kind of have a feedback cycle, to test a tool, to have your teachers or to have reporters test it, and to have them assess for themselves on how it can help their work. So I think that's something that we have to remember, that it's just like any tool like Microsoft Excel or calculator, that it's something that you can test for yourself first. And then that's, I think, when you can. In my work, I've used AI-powered chatbots just to speed up the work of analyzing data or just drawing, just identifying patterns in data. But at the end of the day, it's still me, the human, who's making the journalistic judgment of what goes into a story. So that's how.
Thank you.
If I may add, I think it's also a good opportunity to raise the issue of newsrooms having social policies or rules or standards on the use of AI to guide the newsroom moving forward. I think it's time to discuss that, because otherwise we can just go our own way and use AI possibly to replace journalists. But I think AI should be used as a tool to aid journalism and not replace the people
And
who
so
are.
have conversations in the newsrooms about how much of it is adaptable and how much of it then interferes with real journalism. Let's move to the political front. What are your thoughts given the upcoming barangay elections, the midterm ballots in 2025? You haven't thought of the elections? Yes?
I'm scared that with the 2028, my mind is at the 2028 elections. I'm scared that the people will forget the dire situation that Duterte left the country in when he left office in 2022, and we will be electing a similar person who can unleash human rights crisis in the Philippines again, especially when we think that there's still no justice for what happened then, there's still a culture of impunity, there's still no reckoning, and the thought that we're going to go through that cycle again, I keep thinking, will our institutions even survive again? Will the people even survive?
Right. The short memory is not just in the media. The short memory really is out there, and that's why we feed on the short memories of one another. Public and the journalistic community as well, we live in very short cycles. And the repetition then of our mistakes or our tragedies, I think, has become quite obvious in terms of not just our national situation, but also all around the world. Do you think then that the press could really do anything to improve the capacity of our voters to choose their leaders wisely?
I think for us at PhilStar, we're also trying to intensify our efforts at identifying false narratives and specifically like influence operations. So I think in preparation for the midterm elections, I can just imagine that there are people who are excited for it because they'll be shelling out money to make themselves win. But I think my perspective as a reporter is that there are always who will call them out for trying to create false narratives about themselves, trying to push an agenda. And I think moving forward, that's what we see ourselves doing, like identifying and stating by names the people who are spreading false information.
You think there are enough journalists? You think there are enough of you? Really? Because I have not seen the critical mass in the journalism community that I feel confident that come next vote, We have one in October, and let me tell you, barangay captains have a lot of money and a lot of power, and many do not see government beyond their barangay captain and their barangay council. So let's talk about this. I like hearing that you say there are always going to be journalists. Let's talk about that as candidly as possible, because we are looking at the future of journalism in this room as well.
I don't want to say it like journalists are superheroes, that we're going to save the country. But I think fighting disinformation and educating the Philippine electorate is not only the role of a journalist. It is a whole of a nation approach. Like, I would always tell my students, like, whenever you encounter any misinformation or disinformation on social media, take the first step.
Okay, but let me just stop you there, because we are talking about the role of the journalist, and are we up to that role? At this point, you have no worries, you have no fears that we may not rise to the challenge of the occasion.
I think there are some, and there will always be journalists who will rise to the occasion. But the question is, what is the role of media now in our country? Has our role been diminished enough that whatever we do, whatever fact-checking we do, they will not listen to us, because social media has become so prevalent and so powered that you would rather listen to, say, a micro-influencer rather than, say, established anchor, because you feel that I trust this person more because I see her every day, I see her on the news, but she's impersonal, she is quite disconnected from me. So I think the question now to us as journalists, how can we become more effective? And how do we fight the system? Particularly when it comes to the elections, we don't have laws specifically governing social media. So what do we do about the influencers who are paid to promote certain candidates? They're not required to disclose how much they're spending or how much they're getting. So how will COMELEC actually regulate these people? So unless we're able to address that, I think we will always have a diminished role in the media.
I think part of the problem is we don't cover COMELEC early enough. I mean, the head of COMELEC was the lawyer of a candidate, and we did not hear much news about that, nor did the audience, I think, or voters even know about that. So the question is, covering COMELEC now is important. Now we begin to cover COMELEC. And I am not seeing that either, nor any coverage of the terrible law that needs updating, because that is what the law says. So as we face the coming elections, I'm sorry, really, I can't say that journalists should be doing it all. Journalists can't do it unless the audience or the public sees this as an important and significant problem. Let me move then to the stories that you would like to be able to continue to cover and report. What are the most concerning? What will affect the most number of Filipinos, especially those without power and those who are in remote areas? What are these topics that I think, or that you think, should be part of the news agenda? And I think I'd like everyone to answer this question.
Hello. I'll go first. I think moving forward, with my own coverage yet of students' poor, very, very poor literacy with the education crisis, because it's not just an education crisis, but our crisis too in the media, because it's like a ticking time bomb that in a few years, if all of these frustrated readers in school get to graduate, and they won't be able to take in the information that we're writing for them, and they won't be able to comprehend the extent to which there are bad actors trying to influence them because they struggle to read. So I think that's my role as an education reporter, to not just cover what's happening in schools, but the policymakers and policy implementers affecting those schools, and as well the people who make it out of school who still need education themselves. So I think that's where I see myself moving forward.
Okay, to add to that, I'm currently covering Malacanang, and I wish to see more stories, even not for myself, on how the government spends taxpayers' money. Our debt-to-GDP ratio is at an all-time high. We've received trillions of aid during the COVID-19 pandemic, and yet we see very minimal stories on how the government actually spends them. Right now, the confidential funds issue is a big issue in society, but that's just a portion of what the government has been receiving, not just from taxpayers, but also from international donors and also from lenders.
I think from my part, I wanted to continue pursuing stories on how complicit institutions are in the continued violation of human rights in the Philippines. Citizens, they know their rights, but as we saw during the pandemic, even the smallest unit of society, the barangay, they violate the rights of their constituents. So why are these happening? It's because the Supreme Court, the courts, the police stations, even departments that should have protected our citizens, they do not do anything. So is this a problem of how our government is laid out? Is this a problem of because we are not asserting? So that's one thing that I want to pursue.
I think we also need more stories on appointments, how key people in government are actually appointed, what are their qualifications, what are the ties that bind, and how certain contracts are entered into, what are some anomalies in these contracts. I think it's important to know how the government is being run, and by looking into these details, that's the only way you can actually expose the ties that bind.
For my part, I would want to pursue more stories on education. It's not really as sexy as the political ones, but imagine 9 in 10 Filipino students age 10 are struggling to read a simple text. We're really in a problematic situation. And then aside from that, the actors, as what he said, the implementers, the Department of Education is being led by no less than Vice President Sara Duterte herself. And the issue on confidential funds, we should care about this issue because imagine our brothers, our sisters, or to parents watching us today, your students should not be sharing tables or textbooks inside public classrooms. But look, the government is allotting confidential funds for this.
Are we done? Yes? I thought Katrina was still. Yes, you were the first. Sorry. What then keeps you hopeful about our country? What keeps you going? There is so much to do. I mean, at my age, you will understand how tired I am, yes? And so I have to ask other people, what keeps you going?
Okay, I think the better question is what keeps us going than what keeps us hopeful, because I'm not really sure if we're still really that hopeful right now. But what keeps us going is that there is work to be done, and even if our sentiments were already dampened by the shutdown, by the pandemic, by the previous administration's attacks against the press, the world doesn't stop, no matter how you feel. If you're sad, if you're disappointed about how we're performing as journalists, the issues don't stop. There's still news to be covered tomorrow, so we just have to keep on going. There's no other choice.
The momentum keeps you going.
For me, I've built my journalism around communities ever since I started to become a journalist in 2014. What keeps me going is the fact that beyond the ivory tower of our institutions, in the communities, there are families willing to fight for justice. There are mothers clamoring for justice for their loved ones killed. If they continue doing that, if they continue doing that, even if police visit them every night, if they have to change houses because they are afraid, why shouldn't I? And I mean, they didn't ask anything from me, but it's my obligation as a journalist who has seen them from the beginning to see it until the end, as much as I could, that justice is brought for them.
As long as there's a semblance that somehow things are changing for the better. We're seeing some rulings from the courts after the Duterte administration. There seems to be some hope that some of the cases against activists or human rights defenders are being dropped, but there are also some convictions, no matter how little. I think that's one of the things that keeps me hopeful, because there's something to find for, that if it happens to this case, it could also happen to another case, and I'd like to keep covering those cases. But again, we should always be watchful that even if the government says they're still continuing, so that should be reason enough why we should continue doing what we do.
I think I always draw inspiration from what the late Professor Lourdes Simbulan once said, that journalists are lucky because we are paid to do the right thing. I draw inspiration from what I experienced during the pandemic when, as what I said, I felt really grateful for the reporters who were doing really good work informing the people, whether it's a feature on a jailed activist and her dying baby, or it's an explainer on a policy or an explainer on education procurement. These are the things that have helped me personally to see the world better. And I think that's what keeps me hopeful, that within the industry, there are still, from this panel alone, there are many good journalists who are working 24/7 to deliver news that not just informs, but explains and widens people's worldview. And especially with what we're seeing right now with the disinformation, not just in the Philippines, but globally, we need more voices who will speak the truth and to keep people reminded that there are still people working for the truth.
Okay, what keeps me hopeful, I guess, the students here. Yeah, it may sound cheesy, but I would always ask my students, who among you would still want to be a journalist, despite noticing what's happening with the media landscape right now? And they would always answer me, sir, me. So 70 to 80% of students would still want to be a journalist. And if they are still hopeful, why can't I be hopeful?
Thank you for that sharing, and I thank the panel for their really, truly lively discussion, and that we are now getting ready for our open forum. Those of you who wish to ask questions, there are 2 mics in the hall. You don't have to raise your hand. You may approach the mic even now and take your place in line so that we can have you talking back, making comments, asking more questions, adding, disagreeing, etc. You see what I said? It takes you so long to begin to do your part. Anyone who wants to start, you don't have to be a student, you don't have to be a faculty, you don't have to be out as a guest. You may be another journalist in the hall. Yes, Kaloy.
Yeah.
Carlos Conde, please stand
Morning.
to ask your question so that everyone can see you.
I was struck by the question of why do you remain hopeful, and it reminded me of this old quote from Martin Luther King, which said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So I think for a lot of us, that is what keeps us going. But that's actually not my question. My question is this. As a former journalist myself, I know how spread thin the media and journalists are. And I've always advocated for the fragmentation of the newsroom. In a way that means, basically not doing away with the beat system, but improving it. Journalists need to be experts on the stuff that they cover. They need to spend considerable time studying these issues and become, if they have to become lawyers, then good. But as we know in the newsrooms in the Philippines, I don't know now how long a beat reporter can last in a beat, but it's just not, I haven't seen it, except probably for a few Rappler, probably. But even then, I see now Lian Buan here being promoted, and then somebody else is taking her place. So what do you think about that? Because there are issues that need to be really focused on in for a long time.
Yeah.
And also that, probably media initiatives, media outlets need to come up that cover specific issues. One specific issue that I really feel about is property development and real estate industry. That needs to be covered separately, but we don't do that.
Okay.
What's your thought?
Thank you very much. And I'm still waiting for a student to get up to the microphone. That indeed, calling and reviewing the beat system. It should be news across the different beats. And you should be doing more team reporting on a particular issue. And I wish editors would think a little bit more and basically look at a problem from all the different angles in terms of what government is doing and in terms of how society is perceiving that problem or suffering from that problem. Are we going to be a silent hall here? Yes, don't raise your hand, just walk to the mic. Yeah, stand up on the mic so that you have your place. Who is this? Lian?
Lian.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lian from Rappler. Anyone can answer. In your assessment, is there still a honeymoon? Is the honeymoon period between President Marcos Jr. and the press still ongoing? And should there be a honeymoon period?
Honeymoon. Okay. I think the honeymoon mood is a viral contagion. But these guys have not been doing honeymoon. But tell me what it's like in the newsroom. Tell us. Sorry.
Okay. Let me answer first because I cover the president as of the moment. I think the honeymoon period has long been over, but it's just a matter of the way of how the administration has been managing the communications strategy of the president, which to their credit, they've been doing very well. That's why you see very minimal issues hurled against the president compared to other presidents. During the time of Pinoy, the PDAF scandal was already in a few months before the middle of his term. Duterte administration has been very loud about the war on drugs. It was very controversial. But the thing with the Marcos administration is that it's not just because there's a honeymoon period, but because they just don't respond as much as other administrations did.
And why then does the media let it drop from the agenda?
Well, frankly, one of the factors there is that the administration doesn't have a spokesperson compared to the other administrations. So right now, even if we keep on bombarding them with text messages, when they scene zone you, you just have no choice but to write in your article that ABS-CBN News tried to get the side of Malacanang, but they have yet to respond to the story. It's a difficult thing to balance when you would publish the story, because when you wait for their responses, your story gets somehow held hostage, and it's a very difficult thing to judge among editors and journalists to come in.
Okay. I say the no reply is a story itself. Report it. Report it. How long have you been waiting? that's a story that you did not get a comment that Malacanang has ignored your questions, etc., is a valid report. It is a factual report if it's happened to you because you were assigned to follow up with that story. I now have students waiting. So please, yes, go ahead. Introduce yourself, your school, and then direct it to anyone, or if you wish anyone, just anyone to do it, then you may do so as well. Come on.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ako po si Andre from UPLB, isa po akong DevCom student. Just this past week po, sumali ako sa isang FGD about the problems ng isang DevCom student. At sinabi ko po doon, ang development communication is ironic. Pero naisip ko po yon, i-relate ko na lang sa journalism. Kasi as journalists, gusto nating ipaalam sa tao yung katotohanan. Pero journalism as a field, hindi siya inclusive, I would say. Kasi tulad na lang sa mga conferences na ganito, mapapansin natin na puro English na lang. So, hindi siya open for the general public. Katulad nga na nasabi kanina, mababa rin yung literacy rate. So, paano maintindihan ng normal na tao yung mga conferences na ganito? So, gusto ko lang matanong is, paano natin gagawing more inclusive ang journalism as a field at paano natin papalayain yung sarili natin. Communities na nakaka-partner natin is more than just sources of data and readers, and how do we empower them to become direct partners in the entire process? So,
very good question. One is the problem of language. The other one is simply the news comes from the more important sectors, or what we consider important sectors. Thank you for that question. And is it Jodez that's picking it up? And then anyone else? I'll give another person if you want. Yes.
With Rappler, we are now focusing or been pushing for community-driven stories. Just this month, my colleague Pia Lanada produced a story on the woes or the problems faced by PWDs in the LRT MRT system, transportation system in the Philippines. So she didn't stop by just publishing the story. She made sure that after collaborating with the PWD groups, she made sure that there would be dialogues between the PWD groups and the government. So it's like closing the loop. I think it's high time now for journalists, for media, to stop actually just throwing our stories to the void. We have to make sure that our stories are reach the right communities, not only because they are our sources, but because they are the ones who can do something on our stories. So it's just not a matter of pushing on social media, but also actually organizing events, dialogues, or even roundtable discussions on the issues and inviting the right people. And it's really about community, community, community. That's something that AI can take away from us journalists, that community building, that person-to-person rapport. That's something that we can seize while AI is developing and implementing it to our own journalism.
Okay, so engaging the community is one way of breaking down the walls around journalism. Anyone else wish to add to that? Fine, we move to the next question then. On the other side of the hall, your name and your institution.
Good morning to our dear panelists. My name is Gab Ignacio. I am from the University of Santo Tomas, fourth-year journalism student. Yung question ko po is parang exactly what Sir addressed ngayon. Siguro I would like to add na lang and clarify. So anyone from our panelists can answer po. Kasi napansin ko lalo nung election season ng pandemic, it's really how the trolls, the peddlers of disinformation thrived against us, against you as professional journalists. Kasi nakuha nila yung language, yung kiliti ng, sabi nga ni Ms. Katrina kanina, yung the ordinary Juans and Juanas natin. So nakita ko din sa natin sa question of the day, with the emergence of social media platforms, how can media stay relevant? Siguro po, ang tanong ko po is there a time na, or is now the time that we change, if not totally the way journalism is done, the majority of the ways how journalism is done, kailangan na po ba nating mag-adapt sa kung paano sila kinikiliti ng trolls? Kasi, don't get me wrong po, I really appreciate those in-depth reports na pinoproduce ng kada news outlets about these issues concerning us, especially nga yung confidential funds. Pero speaking of about that, kasi I'm really sure na there are millions of people na hindi pa rin naiintindihan kung ano yung confidential
Okay,
fund
so
at
your
this time.
question now is how you're asking them.
Yes po.
Paano natin to
Yeah, how
gagawin?
can we keep up with
Okay,
how
how do
these
you keep up with this?
disinformation peddlers are?
Bonds?
Hello. Yeah. Mine is not like super technical or what, but I think simply talking to your audience, like how I've noticed that our audience or yung mga readers natin, hindi sila gaanong nag-engage or nag-react or nanood ng isang content if the video is super polished. Like, meron kayong mga may mga graphics kayo dito, may mga title cards and stuff. So, why not, tayong mga journalists, we allot time, let's talk to our community, let's talk to our readers, let's do Facebook Live. Kasi, in that way, they feel like it's more personal eh. Para silang naka-FaceTime lang. Or para silang naka-Facebook call. So parang naisip nila, oy si Rappler, parang kaibigan lang pala namin. Kasi nakakausap namin sila. So in that way, parang mas nare-reach mo sila at mas napapakilala or na-explain mo sa kanila kung ano yung story mo.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I think it's important to realize or to keep in mind always na the taste or the palate of the audience is not a one-size-fits-all thing. So I think a simple solution would be expanding the menu. For example, you have one single topic, but you must deliver it in different varieties for different kinds of audiences. You have Gen Zs who, as Bonds mentioned, prefer yung mga raw videos, yung mga candid videos, but you also have the elder population, an elder demographic, which prefers to read hard news. So you must make all those things available because there is a wide range of consumers out there and we must cater to all their palates.
Okay, so it's iba-ibang approach, iba-ibang dating, iba-ibang kiliti. Okay? We do not forget that your audience is made up of old people, of people who want to read, people who don't want to read, people who just want to watch, and journal that question. But I would like to add to this question, really, we need to consider the issue of language. Ginagamit natin ng Ingles. Sino pa bang talagang nakakaintindi ng Ingles? Yung mga nagsasabing public official na marunong naman ang Pilipinong mag-Ingles, pagdating sa tinatalakay na mga issue ay nahihirapan. Siyempre dahil hindi naman yun ang ginagamit nating lengguwahe para sa talagang pag-uusap ng iba't ibang mga tao. So, thank you for that question, and I now move to this other side as the other side moves up. And please, so that we can get more people to talk, let's keep the question or comment also brief.
Good morning. I'm Carlo from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Student po, Sir Bonds. Before. I would just like to start with this. 95 in every 1,000 children ay hindi na umaabot sa kanilang 5th birthday. Ito rin po ay na-encounter ko na parang indicators, one of the indicators for poverty. And then, gusto ko mag-proceed sa question na parang wrongful po na ang communities natin, Filipino communities are continually tied to issues such as food access and then malnutrition na I think hindi po na-cover kanina. As journalists po, how do we inform people on this? Na I think this is a grave concern, lalo't nutrition at premature deaths ang pinag-uusapan. Are we looking for possible co-creation of content sa ating approach? Anyone can answer po?
Yes, nutrition, hunger.
Actually, my first job with Rappler was specifically focused on hunger, poverty, malnutrition in the Philippines. That was in partnership with the World Food Program and the Department of Social Welfare and Development back when the government was not antagonistic against Rappler. It was great because aside from producing content, we were organizing events, not just even in the AAM within academics, but also among communities. So the content that we produce on top in our newsrooms, we bring that down to the communities, to the mothers, to the children. And I think we did that in Kamanava area, in Tondo. So in that way, we made sure that our journalism does something beyond just writing. And of course, in that process, we tweak the language, we adapt it into what is digestible or that they would understand. And we make it like patok sa kanila. So, for example, I remember we said like, we would talk about what the data in the whole Philippines in their stories. But when we go to the communities, we talk about, ilan ba yung ilan yung mga bata dito, ilan yung mga nagkasakit na sa kanakaraang linggo, ano yung dapat ninyong gawin? So, yeah, that's one thing that we can do.
If I may just add, the problem is, merong gumagawa ng isa, pero maraming sa media na hindi pag-uusapan. Kaya na yung isang kwentong yon, or dalawa, or tatlo, kung ilang taong Judes, or 4, 5 tao dito, kung hindi na-e-echo ng iba't ibang media companies, lulubog lang yan to the bottom of the sea, sabi natin. Diba? Yun yung effect ng napakadaming impormasyon. So dapat rin, kayong mga nag-criticize, kayo ang dapat mag-criticize, okay? Nasabihin doon sa mga iba't ibang news companies na hindi ninyo kino-cover yung gutom ng tao at ang pagkawala ng nutrition ng maraming Pilipino, batang Pilipino. It has to come from you. It has to come from the public. Because the public is often the one that shapes the media that we have. Next, on the other side.
Hello po. Good morning. My name is Edison Mendoza from the University of the East Manila. I'm a Muslim revert. So, kumbaga po, it saddens me kasi every time I attend the mosque, nakakausap or nakakasalamuha ko yung mga kapwa ko Muslims. Ngayon, there is an ongoing issue. Kumbaga, nagkakaroon ng media phobia. I don't know if familiar kayo, pero ayan, so nagkakaroon sila ng takot sa media. Maybe because of the stereotypes or the portrayal of Muslims in television siguro. So my question is, ano po, as a journalist po, ano po bang pwede natin gawin to encourage them to have their trust on the media po?
I think one solution is to hire more Muslim journalists in major newsrooms. Walang ibang makakapagtanong nung mga tanong na dapat itanong sa isang community na mas malalim compared dun sa mismong miyembro ng community. So there are certain aspects to the Muslim community na only Muslims can understand. That's why it's important to diversify newsrooms.
Yes, so diversity in the newsroom is one answer. Also, news editors that will ask reporters to specialize, to learn more, to engage with the Muslim societies or communities in order to be able to gain their confidence and continue to write about news that is outside of the conflict, outside of the controversy, outside of. That would be one thing.
To add to that, ma'am, if it could also be improved that our coverage of Muslim issues or Islam issues should also be improved. Like the terminologies that we use, like if we always connect Islam with the word terrorism, then I would understand if I were Muslim and I would not talk to ABS-CBN, for example, if that's the way how I report the news. So on our part as journalists, we should also be mindful of the language that we use and how we cover it. Not an exploitative way. A reporter will also have to build trust with the community before writing stories on these issues.
Thank you po.
Thank you for that question. Yes, next.
Morning po to everyone. My name is Clarence Mativi Menes from St. Paul University, Manila. As we all know po, we are the journalists that we are finding truth on controversies and issues, especially in the contemporary world. And one of the threats or dangers of being a journalist is that some of us are being silenced, especially in the time of President Duterte. No, my question is that do you fear that one day, rather than delivering the news, you'll be the topic of the news?
Meaning, are you afraid of being attacked or killed? Yes?
Yes.
Is this a fear?
I wouldn't say I'm not afraid to be killed. Everybody is afraid of that. I'd like to think it will not happen to me. But the reality is it can. And so we take every precaution so as not to become the next, victim, journalist killed. But at the same time, I would recognize and acknowledge the impact of the Duterte administration on the media in the Philippines. There are journalists who now think twice before pursuing hard-hitting stories because at what cost? Do you want to be a Percy Lapid? Do you want to be the next person jailed, harassed, or trolled on the media, or on social media? It's really a choice. But I think for me, as long as you stick to your core tenets, you believe that you have to report the story, you have to come up with the truth and look for it, however difficult the situation might be, then I think you'll be okay. But of course, I'd like to highlight the need for the newsroom to be able to support your efforts. It cannot just be an individual effort pursuing, for example, the killers in the drug war. There has to be institutional support from the newsroom.
Thank you, and I don't think we need further answer to that question. Yes? I would like to say that this will probably be, we may not even have time for the last person on this left side, but next, who's the next person? Yes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Nathaniel Melican. I teach journalism in the University of Santo Tomas. And before me, I see a very young panel of journalists. No? And we also have our very esteemed veteran journalists as well on the side. So this is more of a human interest question for me. So do you see journalism as your lifelong profession? And why?
Really? You want to talk more about this? I will ask one person who did not talk too much about how this is a thing. Go. Katrina,
Let me answer because I tried leaving the profession for less than a year. So in 2015, I traveled to Qatar to live with my dad for a while, and I worked as a PR of a conglomerate there. I spent thousands for the visa, and guess what? I didn't last even half a year there. I had to go back immediately to pursue journalism. It's really not about the money, definitely not about the money. Ang baba ng sweldo compared to other industries. But it's really about the wonders of covering different stories every day that keeps you going and that makes you want to stick to the profession.
For as long as they can, they will. Next.
Good morning to each and everyone. I feel I'm the eldest student here.
Sorry, I said we would not take more. Who's Kyla? Can you please police your line? I'm sorry.